after the war started, I was in a ground support that did work on the engines and wasn't involved in the combat flying. But then an accident happened. My best friend, the only picture I have left of him, this little thing right here, named Lee Baldwin. There was a blinking orange light right in the middle of that, where there was a crossing, and just next to that orange light is a park bench, and to the city side of the park bench there's a monument at the foot of a tree with a lot of Elysium planted around it. And that monument is the name of the friend I had who had pulled livers with me and joined the Navy with me. He was from Portland. His name was Lee Baldwin. And he was a splendid person. A real nice person. We pulled livers together, and we just happened to go two ways. I went into the ground part, he went in as a radium, he went into the flying part. On Valentine's Day of 1943, the night before he was visiting me, and I was short on money until payday, and I borrowed $5. And of course Lee gave it to me. The next day, he was in a plane. There were 3 planes that day that got shot down, and his was one of them. And it was up off of Kalihi in the Solomon Islands, the northern part of the Solomons. And when I heard about it, I was so upset. Just so upset. Didn't sleep at all the following night. And I went up to the personnel officer and told of the flying squadron, and told him that I had a reason for wanting to fly. And that's how I got in the flight crew. And I flew the rest of the war. Went out twice with 2 separate sets of planes with the same squadron, in different crews. Now it was dangerous because we lost 1/3 of our planes and 1/3 of our men the first time out. And the second time out, we lost 1/3 of the planes and 1/3 of the men. Big difference though. First time out, we did very little. We just barely stayed alive and got the heck shot out of us. And the pilots the Japanese had were splendid. We didn't have nose turrets, we didn't have tail turrets, we didn't have belly turrets. We had what they call B-24Ds. And they were just mincemeat when facing the Zeros. So that's where we lost our planes. The second time we went out, we had B-24Js. Turrets everywhere. And incidentally, they brought one of the B-24s up the airport up here so that Susie and I could go up and go through it. I was going through the Bombay racks. I got on the Bombay door. Yeah. I started to go through and clunk. Anyway, very aggressive, an attack sort of a thing. Anything we'd see, we'd attack. Now our job primarily was reconnaissance. We had 10 sectors that we flew every day. We'd go out 800 miles, go across 50 miles and come back, pie-shaped sectors. Anything we see, we had permission to attack if we thought we could do it. And most of the time, but we did attack. We'd leave at midnight and be at a certain island 800 miles away that had a Japanese strip on it. And just at the crack of dawn, we'd come in right off the top of the wave and just bomb and shoot the place up, and all the planes that were parked there, and then skedaddle and get out. And we did that 5 times that I know of. Holo, Woliai, and Zamboanga. The 6th time that it happened, another crew had lost a plane captain, and since the skipper had 2 plane captains, myself and another mech, he told me to stay back, and there was a warrant officer that wanted to fly because he loved the glory type things, and he'd take my gun. He was an ordnanceman, and he'd take my gun, so I flew with another crew. That's the day the skipper got shot down. And that's the story that's in this library book, his ordeal being shot down how many men was lost and what happened to them.
So you would have been in that plane?
I would have been that plane, yeah.
My goodness.
And after that, people wanted to fly with me because I was so lucky. But I feel now that I paid back that $5 debt for Lee Baldwin. I took his place flying, and I went down and got this stone that's got his name on it, KIA, Killed in Action, and I just put my initials in the bottom of the stone. And sometimes you want to stop where that blinking light is, that yellow blinking light is going along where all the small boats are. Stop and go over to that walkway that goes across right at the blinking light, and just to your right there's a tree, and at the foot of the tree the Elysium's about as large as this table, and there'll be a monument about this size here, and that's his name's on that. Okay, that explains why I'd never in my right mind go into flight crew, because people were getting killed in flight crew. It was a foolish thing to do, but you get so angry, it's all you can think of. You get bloodlust almost. And that's what happened to me. I was 17 when I started flying. I was 18, and when the war was over, I was 21. So I flew from 18 to 21, 2 trips with 2 different squadrons. Where was I from?
Where did you leave from? Where around here did you leave from?
Tacoma. I was Tacoma. Went to Lincoln High School, and I enlisted in March. They couldn't take me for one reason or other. I don't know what the reasons were. And it was May before I could go to boot camp. May of 1941. That's 7 months before the 7th occurred. The war changed what you had to do, so if we knew what was going to be needed in the war, we would have done boot camp a lot differently. Tying knots, bed rolls, and inspections and things like that, leggings, and how sailors can make landings from ships. Well, that didn't occur. They got something called Marine Corps that did that. But this is what I did in boot camp, because we didn't have a war at that time. That was in the days of what they call ships of wood and men of steel. That's what the chiefs used to tell us. We used to have a navy of ships of wood and men of steel. Now we got men of wood and ships of steel.
That's a great, I like that.
Yeah. An aviation machinist mate. AMM. The rate doesn't exist that way anymore. But that's what it was then, AMM. Aviation machinist mate. I didn't retire from that rate, but that's the rate I had when I was flying. The Navy has 2 different navies operating. Some wear brown shoes and khakis, and the shipboard people wear black shoes. And little rivalry going on. Both are needed, but when you talk about somebody in brown shoe navy, you're talking about somebody in aviation. When you talk about black shoe navy, you're talking about somebody in the fleet.
That's when the aviation part of the Navy was fairly new.
Yeah, it was very new.
Yeah.
Where were you stationed?
Keep in mind that I retired out of the Navy, so I've been at a lot of stations. But during the war, after Sandpoint, they assigned me to a PBY squadron. Catalinas, beautiful planes that they were really nice except when they're shot at, and then they tend to come apart. And it was called VP-51, and they were given orders to go from the East Coast to Hawaii, and I was supposed to join them as they went through San Francisco. I had finished school. My problem is that I got the mumps. They put me in the Navy hospital here, and my squadron went on to Pearl Harbor. This was in November. 4 planes that had amphibious, they can land in either water or land, amphibious type, went to Alaska. The others were just PBYs and had to land in water. And when the 7th broke out, I was in the hospital wondering what was happening to my squadron. Didn't know a thing about it, and then didn't know what was going on. And come to find out when I did get there in February, about February 1st, everything was a mess. The place was a mess. All the battleships were sunk and that sort of a thing. But the squadron had Sunday inspection, and all those PBY-3s were in a neat little row right on the edge of the tarmac, ready to go in the water. There were about 9 of them laid out in a row. Every one of them was shot up. Not a one was saved. But the thing is, not a man was hurt. Not a man was hurt in that. They happened to be somewhere where the bullets weren't on Sunday morning. Now, we had 4 planes up in Alaska. Immediately they called in to come back down, so that's what we had when the Navy discovered that they couldn't patrol with PBYs. They're too vulnerable to fire. So they put us into Army B-24s, which have tremendous long range and have a lot of firepower. And they had to teach those Navy pilots how to fly Army planes, and had to teach us. We spent some time in Barber's Point in Hawaii with 1 B-24 learning to fly B-24s.
Wow.
And keep in mind, these poor Navy pilots have been flying PBYs. When you land in the water, you land like a bird does. You come in and you flare and you put the rear end of the plane down first, and it squashes down and it glides forward. You don't do that with a B-24. They're tricycle landing gear. So the Navy pilots knocked tailskegs out of planes one after the other until finally, and the Army was going crazy, getting tailskegs for those planes because the pilots just couldn't get out of the habit of flaring out and trying to land a B-24 like they landed a PBY. They finally learned.
Oh, nice. Good thing they learned.
Yeah. And it was at that time that I went into the part of the squadron that was going to be this support group. Lee went into the flight group, and we went south with them just after the Battle of Midway. It was about August of 42. We went south.
How far south did you go? Like where?
Went to Guadalcanal. Guadalcanal.
Guadalcanal.
Yeah, Guadalcanal. That was a strip the Japanese started until the Marines landed and took it away from them. And they had fights over it, battles over it for 6 months before the Japanese finally gave up. Turning point of the war really for the Japanese.
So where's the main place that you were stationed? Like, I know you're stationed all over, but like the main place you spent the most time stationed.
Well, the first time out we never got off Guadalcanal. We were in Guadalcanal all the time. We were just fighting to stay there, and we were losing planes that were being shot up or bombed, and from Japanese. So we weren't stationed anywhere for about 6 months. And what happened was that after about 5 months of that, they relieved the squadron and sent it back home. It's in the book. And we were relieved by another squadron, and they took us to San Diego, issued us brand new planes, took 2/3 of the squadron and sent them to other duties, and kept 1/3 as the nucleus for the new squadron. So they had, in my crew, in Crew 1, we had 4 men of 11 that had been down there earlier. A pilot, a bombardier, a ball turret man, and myself. I had a waist gun, fired a waist gun. So that's what it was the first time. Now when we went back, we wouldn't stay in any one spot very long. First place we went to was Green Island, up towards Rabaul, and the Admiralties, called the Admiralties, Green Island and the Admiralties. Beautiful place, beautiful place. We didn't stay there very long because the Marines took and made a strip in a little island just off of New Guinea, further to the east. That's further to the east. And we didn't stay there very long until the Marines took another island up in the Halmaheras, getting closer to the Philippines all the time. So we probably spent 6 weeks in each one of those until the Army, the Army Air Force, which is the 5th Air Force, got ready to support the Seabees landing and making a new strip further up. We island hopped, in other words, and they bypassed lots of Japanese. The nemesis at that time was Rabaul. Everybody's afraid of Rabaul. The whole fleet struck Rabaul many times. It was a real nemesis, and we got around it by bottling it up, bypassing it, and not letting any planes get in, and they just starved. They plowed their airstrips out and started planting vegetables. Japanese, just to stay alive. But we skipped over an awful lot of Japanese. We ended up in Morotai, in the Halmaheras. And the first trip out of the Morotai was when the skipper got shot down. And I flew with this other crew that I had been put with during that month that the skipper was gone. We thought he was dead. I thought I was the only one alive in the crew, until we found out that half the crew that lived was coming back, and the man that took my place come back. He came back.
Good.
Yeah. And they built strips and deserted them after about 3 months. It served their purpose. Went on to another strip. And in three of those strips, there were still Japanese on the island. Instead of fighting with them, they just put a perimeter around the airstrip. They knew they weren't going to be there very long. And when we left, when everybody left, they could have the island. Couldn't not do anything with it.
Yeah.
I've got some pictures that I have since lost, but I did take some pictures surreptitiously. I got a picture of this ship that was burning, and because I thought that was, I turned it in, but I got a copy of it. And I thought that was something I could keep that thing and remind myself of what dishonesty really. It's a beautiful picture. 3 months in the States training, three and a half months in the States training. I was over there until 1945, and I got married. That would be 4 years. So I was altogether about 4 years, except for about 3 months. It was 2 years before I could get back the first time.
What was the climate like to adapt to, being so different?
Yes, wet, mostly wet, but it could be real hot on occasion. We flew every third day, so we were privileged to get cool, go up to 10,000 feet. The first time out, we only went to 1,000 feet because we didn't want any Japanese to get underneath us. We went out and we wanted to get back without being seen. But the second time we went up to 10,000 feet. We wanted to see what was there. And when you do that, it's cold. We used to take people's beer up there and pop and Pepsi Cola and take it during the entire trip, come back, it was nice and chilled. Called V-mail.
Oh, so you were able to keep in touch with family?
Yes, but I wasn't able to get to be with them. Touch with them, yes. And email was 2 weeks. I thought that was pretty fast.
Were those the letters that the censors would cut parts out of?
Well, no, because of email, it's a full single sheet, and they didn't need to cut. They didn't need to open anything up because they could read it. It was out wide open. Everybody would read.
Hence the name V, because you folded it into a V shape. Okay, got it.
You didn't put in there where the family jewels were kept. That's for one thing.
Right.
What type of plane did you fly in?
B-24Ds and Js. We called them PB-4Y1s because it's a Navy designation. They were the same as the Army, except we had different turrets. We had what they call airco turrets, which are perfectly round turrets. The Army had consolidated turrets, which were like tail turrets. You had a tail turret. Matter of fact, they put a tail turret in the bow to start with. And by the time they got around to making them from the Navy, they put a perfectly round, like the plane was that was here, perfectly round airco turret in the front. Beautiful turret. Smooth. PB4Y1. PB. Okay, patrol, bomber, 4 engines. Y is the consolidated thing. 1 is the first run of it. The D's was the first run. ABCs, they didn't have runs on them.
How did you train as a gunner to fire from a moving plane at a moving target?
That's hard to do, but most of our gunnery was effective with strafing on the ground.
Oh,
Only once did we fire at a moving plane, and we were equipped really to do it well. This was in the new crew that I was in just before the end of the war. We were flying at 8,000 feet, going around Borneo in heavy clouds, and jumping along and bumping along in the clouds. All of a sudden we came bursting out in the clouds, and right at our level, coming off to the side that was coming into the cloud, was an open cockpit plane. And it went into the cloud so fast that the gunner on that side, it was his side, the gunner on that side, just swung us around, barely got it, and was gone. It happened so quick that the pilot didn't see it. Only 2 of us in the waist hatch and the co-pilot saw it. And it was an open cockpit. The guy was up there for a lark. He didn't have a gun in that thing. It was just an old plane. He was up there. He had a thing flying around his neck.
didn't know how close he came, huh?
Can you imagine a big B-24 bristling with guns come bursting out at him? I'll bet.
Oh, yikes! Yeah.
But he didn't want to stay in the air very long. If that had been the skipper, he'd have gone in after him, but fortunately it wasn't the skipper.
That's interesting, huh?
But that's the only air-to-air gun rate that I got involved with.
Yeah.
An awful lot of strafe in the ground flying.
They actually did launch those off the carriers at one point, didn't they? When they
B-25s.
was it 25?
Twin engine, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Fine plane. Fine plane.
Was that the Mitchell? Is that
Yes.
the same plane?
Yeah.
Okay.
Flown 1,557 hours. 1,557 hours.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
About 1,000 of that was during the war. The number of missions? Oh,
That was how many hours he logged.
that's how many hours I logged.
His planes keep track of their flights,
We can
their flights and so forth,
take missions here real quick.
by how many hours they're in the air.
10, 18. This month we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's 30. This month we had 31. This month we had maybe another 30. That'd be about 60.
Another 3 you had?
These are each missions. This is the date. Here's the kind of plane we were flying. This was the serial number of the plane. This is the number of hours that we flew, and this is the pilot who flew. And well, you can see this. Some of these months, I got one very hectic month in here, the end of which the skipper got shot down, because that was one rough month. Where is it now? Here it is. You can see this month. We were losing planes right and left, and having all kinds of problems. Now, all pages aren't like this. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 hops in a month.
Why?
Yeah. It was different. Our missions, keep in mind, in Navy Patrol Squadron, you've got 10 hours of complete boredom and 15 minutes of earth-shaking fear and tension. So when you talk about all the time that you got, most of that time is just boring, looking at the ocean, flying. Very, very small amount of it is combat. If I took all the combat I had in here and put it together, I'd probably have 20 minutes altogether of shooting and being shot at.
Well, that was probably enough.
Well, on the other hand, like Don, he had day after day of being shot at and shooting.
Really?
Had that stress all the time. We had the stress just momentarily. It was gone. And I'd much rather have it the way I had it than the way Don had it.
Now, what did Don fly in?
He didn't fly.
Oh, he didn't?
He was a ground pounder.
Ah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Sure, I see.
Okay, first of all, a gunner. I was a gunner. But I was also a mechanic. It was my job, one of my jobs, to see that the plane was gassed up, to see that all the gas was transferred out of tanks we had auxiliary tanks. It was my job to turn the plane up and have it ready for the pilots when they came down. It was my job to move the plane when it had to be moved, or taxied from one revetment to another. They had revetments for the big planes. That was pile of dirt in a U-shaped form that the plane could get in. If there's any bombing, Japanese bombing, they'd have to hit the plane exactly to do any damage because of the pile of dirt. Big, huge U-shaped pile of dirt for each plane. The Japanese did this too. And my job to bring the skipper coffee. My job to kick the nose wheel out when it won't come down. My job to make sure that all of the aircraft have their supply of ammunition. All the gunners. Out of the plane, it was my job to see to it that the crew was taken care of before they had to go to bed. Everything was taken care of for the next day's flight or whatever. I didn't do all that one day. Those were the kind of responsibilities that I had. I was a second class when it started, and I was the first class when it ended. That's an aviation machinist mate's job.
Interesting.
Now, that's not what I ended up with when I retired. The world was loaded with aviation machinist mates, and I saw the folly of staying on that rate. I retired as an aviation electrician. The first time they had us flying, Douglas MacArthur controlled us, and he couldn't stand to see those Navy B-24s sitting down there while his men were flying, regardless of whether the fact that the Navy people didn't have any training in night flying, didn't have any training of bombing in formation, that sort of thing, or flying in formation even. So we were forced to fly with the Army on bombing hops during the first tour out there. We lost a couple of planes doing that. And it was, we just weren't trained for it. But that was the early plane, the B-24D. And then the B-24J was the best. That was the plane could take care of itself. And I stayed with B-24s until the end of the war.
The guns on the plane were Browning 50 caliber machine guns.
What was that?
Their Browning makes the 50 caliber machine gun. It was developed, I think, in World War II, and it's still in use today.
There's a Browning patent, but the Browning didn't make them.
Oh, is that right?
They farmed it out. Matter of fact, most of the B-24s were made by the Ford Motor Company. Most of the Army B-24s were made out of Ford.
Didn't know that. Huh. Seemed that it was Boeing.
Consolidated farmed out a lot of his planes.
Yeah. Huh.
Everybody was manufacturing, was making tanks or planes. GM made tanks.
Yeah.
our planes just happened to be made in San Diego, but it could have been made by Ford. Well, now, we were definitely involved with that. The second trip out, we made our own battles. We weren't involved in battles. We were hit and run. We were strafing something and going. We were picking on them when they weren't looking type things. So it's not battle so much. If we saw a ship that we thought was too heavy for us, we left it alone. So we picked. It's more like guerrilla war with aircraft. We struck when we thought we could do the most good, and snuck away when the odds were too much against us. So we could pick our battles. That's a good thing to have. Be able to pick your battles.
Yeah. Targets of opportunity.
Yeah. I learned more when I got home than I possibly knew. And I thought I knew about World War II, and 2 years ago I went up to the library and started reading and found out I knew very little bit about World War II.
Well, they didn't want people to know very much about what was going on. That was all very secret. Because if the soldiers knew or the airmen knew, then there's a good chance that the enemy could find out. And so there's a lot of
you
secrecy.
didn't know any more than you were told.
Yeah. And that's still the case in warfare.
Yeah. Victory in Europe occurred. See, I got back. I was married in February, and victory in Europe came, I think, in June, and victory in Japan came in August, I believe. So the war was still going on. 6 months, 7 months. They weren't about to send us out a third time. Matter of fact, they were talking about a war bond drive with us. Send us on a war bond drive. I don't know. I fired at people. It reminds me of WWII. All of us were shooting. The Japanese had small hangars. They had nose hangars and then small. They didn't have big hangars like we have. And this Japanese was running towards the hangar. And I was looking, so I wasn't the one doing the shooting. But somebody at the bow or turret, top turret, opened up, and it looked like when he was in dead run, something picked him up. And he was still moving his arms and his head, and he went, and it carried him another 15, 20 feet, and it dropped him in a big huddle. Now there's a man that was dead before he ever hit the ground. Who knows who hit who? At least 2 turrets were shooting at him. You don't know. I can tell you about being duped. I didn't know I was duped until I got up to the library up here and read about on WWII, the Japanese had discovered that they couldn't defend the island. So what they did, they didn't park any more planes there, except they had one plane that couldn't fly. So they set the plane up next to the hangar. They set it up, put the prop on it, wings out and everything, and they set it up in such a way so that it would just lure people in and shoot at it. Well, it lured us in twice, and I shot at that thing. I couldn't understand. I could see tracers. I could see tracers, and it must have been incendiary, hitting that thing, but no fire. Well, of course, there's no gas in the tanks. They drained all the gas out. I didn't know that at the time. And the second time we went back, I thought, that dang plane's still there. So I don't know how much American ammunition I wasted on that dummy plane. I read about that, put that up, and I thought, oh my gosh.
It was only
talking about.
It was that much.
Yeah.
Just reading about it, you put those two together. That's probably what happened. Yeah. Huh. That's good.
Proud? Yeah, sure. I don't like wars, and I don't think there are such things as live heroes. To me, a hero is somebody that's given their life for their country, and I didn't do that. But I'm proud of the fact that I served. But I'm proud of the fact that I had people serving behind me. We went to some place, we had our bunks all made up. We had showers built for us. The CBs just did all these things for us. Now, somebody's got to be proud of them, because we got there when they were still shooting. Here, these CBs are older men that went in for construction battalion, CB. And they usually had little pop tummies and about 40 years old. But they fixed camps up for us. They had camps ready and waiting for us. We'd go to an advanced base and think, boy, this is really out in front. And we'd have showers, and we'd have bunks set up. We were really treated well. For me, in the primitive area they were in, the conditions were nice. Now, when I first went out there before I got in flight crew, conditions were not nice. Spent much time in the mud. But only because I was in the flight crew that I got the benefit of better treatment. Flight crew could walk into the chow hall anytime they wanted to have coffee. The ground pushers couldn't do this. It was perks for, I guess, for being in flight crew. A lot of arrogant flight crew people. Well, I feel great that it turned out that way. I feel great knowing the power of American industry and how when America organizes what the people can do back home, they put their shoulder to a wheel and roll their sleeves up. We smothered the Japanese. We smothered them. At the beginning of the war, they had 7 aircraft carriers, and they managed to get us down to 2. At the time in the middle of the war on, we had so many aircraft carriers out there, we had a hard time finding names for them. I think there were 42 aircraft carriers out there, and the poor Japanese had a hard time keeping the ones going that they did have. So I'm proud of the people that made that possible. Somebody back home made a lot of effort to make that possible. We just overpowered them. Huh? I'm glad we did. I certainly wouldn't want to see anybody land in Japan with the killings that would happen when that happened. There are wars that are imposed upon you that you can't avoid, and that was one of them, due to Pearl Harbor. We have been probably involved in others that were imposed upon us, but it's not. This last episode we were in here in Iraq was one of the first times that in a large effort where we made a preemptive strike, where the Americans struck first. And I really have a hard time in my mind justifying that, how that is in defense of my country.
I think a lot of people are asking that same question.
Yeah. We did get a ship that time. We got a couple of them that time. But this is the hell month. This is the month that the skipper didn't come back.
What's this? All hands dead?
Yeah, that was a crew that got it. Here we go. 19th crew 1 with 280 did not come back to patrol. Gunner Reed took my place in the hop. That was Epiphany.
Oh gosh.
40 planes in the airstrip. Found ourselves heading for half a dozen seaplanes, and 10 bombs and 2 small ships. And the thing is, he turned around to take pictures, it says in here. He turned around to take pictures. And that's he didn't turn around to take pictures. He turned around to make another strafing run. It says somewhere in here. I really didn't know much about. You keep in mind, I got in before the war. We weren't in war, so I got caught in war at the very beginning. And when I heard about the 7th, I was in the hospital, and when I heard about the attack, and I'm just wandering through the wards because they wouldn't let me go yet because of my mumps. Wandering through the wards, everybody was kind of scared and didn't know what to do and that sort of thing. So numb. There's a numbness, and everybody had a numbness. Didn't know what to expect. The usual group for area, the war. It seemed like you got an area medal for about everything you were in. But the air medal itself is not what they call a classified medal, but it's one of the it's a high unclassified medal, and I got 2 of those because I was out twice. And the DFC was a classified medal, and at the very beginning they paid you a little extra for having those kinds of things.
DFC is Distinguished Flying Cross?
Yeah. And about the 3rd year afterwards, why they stopped paying for them. The first pilot I had, the first time out, lived up here about 6 or 8 blocks. His name was Scotty, and he died here about 3 years ago. But we were in different worlds. In those days, officers and men were in separate worlds. And we overcame that later on, but we never really were close friends. But he's the last one that I know of. No, I don't attend unions anymore. I attended about 5 reunions in the past. It's been 60 years?
Really?
60 some years. About 5 reunions, and same old beer type things. The stories tales get longer, and everything gets deeper. My last one was talking about the well that was in the middle of our tenting area. There was no well there; it was a Lister bag. But everybody was talking about the well, so I didn't want to argue with them. We just didn't know. In the very beginning, at least in my awareness to the Japanese problem, this country had an attitude of superiority towards anything, particularly people of color. And the Japanese are a people of color. So we figured that they were cross-eyed and they were bandy-legged and they couldn't fly very well, couldn't shoot very straight and all that sort of thing. Those kind of beliefs prevailed. But we soon learned, to our amazement, that they could fly very well, they could shoot very straight. So these prejudices that you go into the war with are shed real quickly when you find that they were superior to us in many aspects. The thing that they couldn't overcome was America's tremendous ability to produce war materials. They couldn't overcome that. Instantly, I had no problem. I was raised with Japanese going to school with me. I had a good friend, Tom Simba, went to school with me, whose parents were forced on the back of a truck at about 8 o'clock at night one evening because of the war. And I went through California coming home in the middle of the war and saw a detention camp with searchlights and wire and that sort of a thing. And I thought, how terrible, how these people largely are Mexican Americans. And it just happened to be, when I went through, at the same time, one of our aircraft carriers, a USS Yorktown, was pulled into Pearl Harbor, all beat up, taking 2 torpedoes. It was a mess. And they had to get ready for Midway. Desperate. They were working 24 hours a day on it to get it ready. And my uncle, who was in the Navy then, over at the shipyard, called me up and said, I want to show you something. He says, come on over here. I said, I can't talk about it on the phone. I want to show you something. So I took the ferry off Fort Island, went over to the shipyard, saw him, and we walked up to the shipyard. It was a night. And he said, "No, we'll wait till these people lift their masks." They were welding, and they have to lift their masks to wipe the sweat off. And when they lifted their masks, they were Japanese. Japanese Americans, American citizens, who were working their guts out to get that ship ready to go out for the Battle of Midway. It taught me kind of a lesson. Those people were good, hard-working American citizens who did support their home country in the war that the home country started. And to think that way back in the States, we were marching them off to camps, whereas in Pearl Harbor we were sure glad to have their skills to help put a carrier out to sea again. It taught me something. It taught me to be a little more tolerant in my thinking. It was when I was stationed at Whidbey Island and with P-2Ds, and we were patrol squadron, and we were stationed in Okinawa. And we had a trip to Japan. I went into Japan.
It's more babysitting
and
than it is teaching.
it was a mess. It was just a mess. The Japanese trains were still running, and on the trains with all these Japanese, and they had one car reserved for American servicemen. And here you had these people crammed on a train, and two servicemen in this car. And that kind of bothered me. And I went out to the beaches, and here you had Japanese people using the worst part of the beach and the best part of the beach set aside for, well, at that time, American servicemen. That slowly changed, I understand. General MacArthur slowly changed that, did away with those kinds of things. So, as far as I was concerned, I can be friends with any of the people that I shot at. I don't know whether they want to be friends with me. Because I remember when they were American citizens sitting in a school right alongside of me. Well, if there is a need for secrecy involving something, I can understand why we would put a twist on it or cover it and not talk about it for a while. To give you an illustration of what I'm talking about, when I first heard about Pearl Harbor, I was in the hospital, and we heard there was a battleship damaged and that another one was being beached for repairs, and that's all we heard. But when I got out there, I found the USS California sunk down to the top of its turrets, the Oklahoma turned upside down, the Arizona blown apart, the West Virginia laying on its side, the Nevada had pulled out, and they beached it to keep it from sinking. And here were all these battleships, and the USS Pennsylvania was over at the shipyard, all blown apart. It had been hit while I was sitting in the shipyard. And I can understand why they didn't tell the American citizens about that horrible damage. I don't know what it would have done to the morale. But the morale of the people over there was bad enough, the people that were involved. And it wasn't until the middle of the war that the Americans began to learn how bad hit they were at Pearl Harbor. Absolutely terrible. This wasn't what I was fighting for. These were American citizens. I could understand maybe gleaning from them. You see, hon, these people some had kids in the Japanese Americans. Some of them would send their kids to Japan for an education they felt that was a superior education. And these people were called Aisi. And they were Native Americans, but they were in Japan. Some of them were caught in Japan during the war. They were given a choice of going home or of remaining in Japan. 60% chose to remain in Japan. 40% of them came home, though. Now these are the 40% that in spite of what they had been propagandized in Japan while they were getting their education, still chose to come back to their home country. These are also the people that gave us the splendid language schools in California for Japanese-speaking people. The Amnesi's Japanese was not very good. That's what happens when you're a long way from your mother country. Your language slips. But the IEC had been over in the mother country, and they had to speak good Japanese. So they had to go back and teach some Nisi Japanese for the benefit of those that are going to be going out and become sergeants or warrant officers and work with the Army in interrogation and broadcasting to people to come in out of the caves and that sort of thing. So I forgot what my main point was.
Internment camps, how'd you feel?
Well, bad.
Awful.
Awful. Awful's not the word. Shamed. I went into the war because I had a bad home life and it was hard. My father was too poor to even get relief. And the way he was too poor is that he had a job at a mill. His wife had undulant fever, had been in the hospital for 2.5 years. The hospital took his pay because of past debts that built up. And he had to get a second job. And his boss arranged for him to what they call scab. And he had to find a second job that the union didn't know about. And that little second job was what supported the kids. Well, my mother was in hospital. And we did not eat well. We did not live well. And voila, they eat splendidly in the Navy. I found things to eat and things to enjoy when I first went in the Navy I never even knew existed. So it was probably a selfish thing to join the Navy when I did, because I didn't expect war was coming. My father was irreparably harmed, I think, psychologically by what happened to him. And he'd take it out on me occasionally. And so my relationship with him was not good. So I had to get away from home. And that was a perfect answer. Go in the Navy. Where they fed so well, took good care of you. Didn't foresee a war coming at all. Well, being away from home, worst thing. And of course, the next worst thing was empty bunks after people were lost.
Yeah, but they live here for a certain quality of life.
Having friends one day and losing them. In some cases not knowing what happened to them, they just disappeared. First trip out, we lost crews and we didn't know anything about it, they just go and disappear. Second trip out, we knew pretty well what caused them to disappear when they did. But that's kind of hard, losing friends. You don't make close friends. I had a close friend going in, joined the Navy with him. And he remained a close friend. And I felt in a way that the Japanese had taken my best friend and I was going to make them pay for it. Even though later on I was frightened many times, I was scared many times, maybe a little sorry that I had done what I did, but I stuck with it. So why did I do what I did? I don't think I had any choices. What would you do if you had a real close friend that was taken away from you and you knew the cause? You'd have something to do with the cause, wouldn't you? Well, that's in effect what I did.
More time than coming from the bridge.
It happens. You don't feel frightened. It's later when everything's all over with and you're flying and all of a sudden you feel something's wrong. then you get a little frightened. But you don't have time to be frightened when this is going on. You do what you're trained to do, and there's a satisfaction of knowing that you're getting it done well, and you don't really feel fright when you're doing it, but you do feel fright afterwards. At least I did. When I got out of a plane, I usually got on my knees. I wasn't particularly religious either.
Yeah.
Didn't know what to figure. We knew what they were telling us, which wasn't very much.
Kenai Peninsula's very
And
massive.
like I told you, when I did find out,
Snow.
more shock.
About 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Life jackets floating around, oil everywhere,
My job was
just a
once
mess.
I-
And that was a
when
month
after
later.
it stirred, I was responsible
That was
for
how long, time lapse between the attack and when you
Well, it
arrived?
was longer than that.
Was it?
It happened on the 7th, and that was the 2nd of February when I got there. There were no ships going there to begin with. The Lure Line's the first ship to go in, and it had 2 destroyers to get in, and they zigzagged 2 weeks to do zigzag and go all over the ocean to get there. They didn't know where the Japanese were.
Yeah.
That was a shock. Such
Such
a pretty place to be fouled that way. But the Japanese, as we later learned, made some terrible mistakes. Terrible mistakes.
What were those now? What?
Picking on those poor old battleships that were already
Not getting the aircraft carriers. Yeah.
not getting the aircraft carriers, not getting the fuel depot, not getting the submarine pin, when they paid a horrible price for ignoring those things. And shooting up old planes that weren't worth a darn anyway, including my squadrons.
Okay.
I've had a long feeling that I owed $5 to a friend that I couldn't pay back. That's all psychological. And the urge comes to pay it back one way or the other. And that's part of this effect of the war on me. Whenever I go down and trim up the flowers around the stone, I sit on the bench a little while and think about, would Lee do the same if it had been me that got killed? Well, I'm sure he would, because he was that type of person.
I was going down the driveway.
So it's affected me.
Heard the car and came out.
I don't ever want to see it go through another war like that.
For a half hour to tell you to not.
But
try to
should
come out here.
we be put to it,
Said, too late.
where war is inevitable, I would like to see us rise to the job as well as we did that time. National defense.
Trying to get Barkley.
Now, I don't know what I did about national defense, but we got medal. It's a good feeling to give medals, and they're not really worth very
Would
much.
not go.
To me, the only thing that's really worth much is this one and this one.
And he was out, Marty was out.
Because I know what I had to go through to get those. Not just being there.
So this is the Distinguished Flying Cross.
Yeah,
Fine.
and that's an air medal with a cluster, meaning two air medals.
For the two tours that you
Two
served.
tours, yeah, combat tours, they have to be combat tours. You gotta be CAC, combat air crew.
Come back in here. But
And the rest are medals
He brought
that,
at night and neighbors
good conduct.
around the lake had fires built.
what else is there? What choice do you have?
Some neighbors had flood ice, and they put them out on the lake, ice skating out on the lake. It was just gorgeous. And you go out, and when there weren't people out, it'd be so quiet, and you'd hear this,
Would you believe I've never worn
it
those
was like
things?
a laser,
I would believe
you know,
it.
from Star Wars.
These two were given to me at a ceremony where I was,
And it would-
and died here.
Okay, so this is your crew, right?
Yeah.
Okay, where are you?
All forbidden.
In the picture here, are you?
I'm right there.
Geared for it.
I'm the one's all sweaty.
And that is the trick.
That first snow year that we were here, Port Angeles did
Gotcha.
not have a snowplow.
So tell me again what you know of your
And so
crew.
they had to borrow one.
Okay, he was killed on the island, he never came back.
Twins has a
This chap survived and became an official in the Philippines, married a Filipino woman. I haven't seen him since. This one was killed, he was a tail gunner. He was killed in the hop. They shot him, they killed him shooting. This chap survived and became a preacher. This chap is in California. He's a ball gunner, an excellent ball gunner. Excellent. Zeke, it was one of the old timers. Zeke, myself, and Villa, that's the other mech. We were the ones that were from the old squadron, and he was from the old squadron. Everybody else was new.
I'm sure every city probably has them. I would no longer.
And so he died?
Yes, he was shot in the leg.
They were all.
From what I understand, shot in the leg, and it went through his hip.
It's accumulated.
And
Snow and
so
ice.
the plane went in the water, he couldn't keep a tourniquet on
And they
it.
were big ruts.
And they didn't want him around the rest of them because he was bleeding. and that's a bad area for sharks.
Yeah.
So they gave him a life jacket
Yes, that's
and
true,
tried to get
because
some
the
distance
frisbee
from him
because
because
the
he
snow
couldn't float and
starts to
keep
maybe melt a
pressure
tiny
on
bit
his-
and freezes solid,
and
and
they
then
never saw him
snows
again.
and melts
So
a
he
little
was
bit,
probably bled to
freezes
death
solid.
then?
It's
Probably
like-
bled to death.
They were just like.
They didn't see any
rocks,
evidence
and then
of
the
shark
bars on
attack,
both
but
sides.
they were worried about
So
shark.
these
Do you know how he died?
He died with the Emily lit right on top of him when it stopped
Yes, this-
skidding on that island, lit right on top of him, killed him.
Yeah, well, we pretty much came to a standstill.
He
too.
died being shot in his turret. He was
In
shot,
Idaho, we have
to death in his turret.
That's the way it is. Not in-
and he died. He's the one that had shot in the leg. He was the other mech besides me.
They're prepared for it.
And he was shot to death in his turret, ball turret. The ball turret, tail turret never got out of their
I mean, the
turrets.
cities
They just didn't
are
make it.
ready for dealing
Ball
with
turret and
parts
tail
that they
turret.
have to
There's the
deal
tail
with.
turret, ball turret.
Yeah, a four-wheel drive
tail
vehicle,
turret.
you
Both of them
keep
were killed in their
inside.
turrets.
I mean, whatever you need in cold.
What do you know of what became of the plane itself?
Oh, it's sunk. It sunk. Yeah, it's sunk. It wasn't. It was almost a crash landing. They broke a wing off. The back plane broke in two at the back. Got the bomb bays. It was so badly mangled that the life rafts that are on
All the
top,
way up.
water actuated life rafts, get salt water and they spring open. They were pinched together from the wings folding up. They wouldn't go out.
Yeah.
And the only thing they found to float on was the one Bombay tank. One Bombay tank
The
tore
water,
loose.
it was sleet,
And
and it was freezing towards West Seattle.
this is the
Way
navigator.
up in the air there,
He's still
it
alive.
must have been
Well,
about
these two are
20
dead.
degrees Cooler than it was down here.
Who's the navigator again?
Or go into
He was,
downtown
Mr. Martin.
Seattle
Okay.
And as far as he worked at Kodak Company
Yeah, we're right
in
to
Connecticut,
go.
and I think he
I
might
didn't
be
want
still
to be up on
alive.
that great high bridge,
He
so
died
I
just
took
recently.
to
He was teaching
Seattle.
high school after he
And I went
retired
out
as a
to
full
freeway at
captain.
Seneca.
And this chap, this is a second class gunner's mate that went to flight school, and he was an enlisted pilot. And he was a very good pilot.
And
And I'm sure glad we had him, because sometimes the skipper wasn't as good a pilot as he should have been, especially when he'd been drinking. And Mac always came through for us in those cases. Took care of the skipper. Skipper would always wake up 2 or 3 hours later, fresh and ready to go, but it was kind of worrisome to the rest of us. He had a trick when he'd been drinking a little bit, and we knew it had to, at midnight, take off. He'd come down in his Jeep, and the lights were on the plane and everything, and he'd stand up in the seat of the Jeep, and he'd say, "I have to pull a pre-flight." And he'd say, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, the engines are all here, let's go. And then I'd cringe, he'd cringe, and then Mac would would say, "Skipper, I need the practice. You don't need the practice like I do. I need the practice. Let me have this take off." Of course, the skipper would always say, "Yeah,
Yeah. Good move.
good move." Yeah. Rest of us would breathe easy.